Thanks, Adam. I'd like to get your perspective too, Dalton. What do you think alignment means from the perspective that you're working from, the free energy principle? Yeah.
Sure, yeah. Well, one thing that Adam mentioned, which is really highly relevant here, is the free energy principle straight away is about describing the interactions of things within a joint system. So I gave the example of an agent and an environment and a boundary between them. But environment is a very generic term here. It can mean other agents with which a given agent is interacting. So understanding how agents form beliefs about other agents, and in particular, not just observing the actions of these other agents, but making inferences, forming beliefs about what's motivating those actions. This is a very natural way of thinking about the collectivization of behavior and of alignment, and contrasting it with game theoretic competition, where the kinds of utility functions that you are dealing with are very simplistic and are largely known, at least to the modeler. So this is a much more natural way of thinking about much more sophisticated situations.
Thanks, Dalton. So part of the work I do, in collaboration with you as well, is on empathy. And my premise is that one of the conditions for alignment to even occur is the abilities to find these overlaps between your models and have an intrinsic motivation to remain within these overlaps and aim for similar goals. And so, Michael, now I'm going to ask you, because the counterpart to that is that it may lead to suffering. Empathy implies that you will potentially experience also negative aspects of experience. So along the lines of what constitutes alignment, I would also like to get your take on whether suffering should be part of that equation.
Wow, yeah, that's a profound question. I don't necessarily have expertise on that one, but I'd like to say a couple of things about the first part, which is alignment. When we look at an embryo, you look at an embryonic blastoderm. Let's say there's 100,000 cells. Why do we say there's one embryo there? What is there one of? And when we look at a system like this, what there's one of is literally alignment. It's both physical, because the cells do actually have to physically align, but more importantly, they're aligned in having bought into the same vision of their journey in anatomical morphospace that they're going to take. And this is, I specifically reject any kind of open loop sort of cellular automata-like model, because actually everything that we've seen over the decades suggests that it is very much a goal-directed process in the sense of problem solving. It's an error minimization kind of thing where the collective, not the individual cells, but the collective knows where they're going in anatomical space. And what makes it an embryo is specifically that all of them have bought into the same exact model of where they're going to go. Now, there are interesting things you can do. For example, if you have, and I used to do this as a grad student in duck embryos, you have a flat blastoderm, you take a little needle and you put some scratches into that blastoderm. Well, until for the next 4 to 6 hours, until they heal back up, every one of those little islands doesn't feel the presence of the others. So each one will organize into an embryo. They will then heal up, but now you've got twins and triplets and whatever, and they're all sort of at different orientations relative to each other. But within each embryo, everybody is aligned to the same pattern. We have many examples over the years that we've seen where either deterministic or stochastic events are completely coordinated within a system, but then are sort of discoordinated across systems, whether that be embryos or organs or whatever. So this ability of having basically being committed to the same model and having decided where the boundary is between you and the outside world, right? So these cells are part of me, these other cells are not, right? That the boundary of that cognitive light cone is basically set by the parts alignment to a model and the degree of to what degree the model is compelling, because we also have experiments where we try to give the cells a different model than what they're going to be, and so we say, you really should be an eye. And before that, they thought they were going to be gut. And then we can actually watch as there's this battle of worldviews, because that's really what I think is going on here. There's a competition. It's not between cells or molecules or anything like that. It's really a competition between, there's a bunch of cells that are saying, yeah, we should definitely be eye. And they're trying to convince the other cells around them to participate in this, to align them. And so there's this like non-local kind of alignment effect. And the other cells are resisting, because this is a cancer suppression mechanism. If your neighbor starts having a weird voltage state with a different view of what he's going to be, usually that's either developmental or that's cancer, right? So they try to resist and they try to fight. And so sometimes you get the ectopic eye and sometimes you don't, depending on which view wins out. So I really see this as this business of alignment as a battle of models and future goal states. And you can think about the suffering aspect of it, because it turns out that what drives that error minimization towards those goals is stress. So life exploits the scaling of stress mechanisms that basically project the magnitude of error across tissues, so that way you get non-local responses, so that because lots of errors can't be fixed locally, you have to have the whole system has to know. So there's this propagation of stress, and then everybody's invested, not so much because they're altruistic per se, but because in order for their stress to go down, they have to get your stress to go down. And so then everybody sort of works on this stress surface. And the final thing I'll just say to that is that there's a kind of a meta aspect to this, which is that in this battle of perspectives, it also matters for the observer. Because, so let's say in this case, the observer is us as scientists, or it could be a parasite or a conspecific, or it could be many different things. But let's say it's the scientist. You could say, okay, I don't want to say it's 100,000 cells. I want to say it's one embryo. But somebody else could say, no, it's not even that many cells. It's way more molecular networks that are underneath, right? And so you have to pick your level of description, and the level of description you pick is also affected by what kind of alignment and what degree of alignment you are actually able to see, and that it's maybe you have a choice. If you're highly intelligent, maybe you have a choice of which one you're going to see. So it helps the system itself, but it also means that observers are going to have something to hold on to when they pick a system. They pick out a system through its environment.
Thank you. That's actually I think it's particularly relevant because we're talking about super specialization and how you can remain relatively aligned, even though to some degree you're going to lose overlap by virtue of specializing. And I think, Dalton, I'm gonna now aim this at you. We have worked on resilience, and so I'd like to get your take on what does resilience play in terms of alignment, and then potentially if you have some perspective on the question of suffering as well.
Sure. Yeah. Right. So we have done a lot of work together on resilience. I think it's a sort of finer grained view on self-organization, which I like a lot. Because, of course, being good at self-organizing to one particular kind of state does not necessarily mean you are a good agent. You may be good for one particular environment or one particular set of tasks. But when we think of really sophisticated intelligent systems, we actually think about flexibility. We think about adaptability, evolvability, things of this nature. So I think it's a nuance to some of the discussion that hasn't existed previously, but with the recent stuff that you've been introducing me to, now we have some more terminology with which to discuss this distinction. And I think it will be important for having alignable agents to engineer agents with more resilience. Because if you have agents where you sort of knock them out of the regimes that they are used to organizing for, and they can't respond flexibly enough to that, then they sort of run amok. It's not maybe very predictable what they'll do. And in particular, we know it's easy to conjecture that, at least, that they will not remain aligned if they are not resilient in this sense of having some plasticity, having some flexibility to respond to differing environmental conditions. Then when you put the agent in a different environment, it may no longer be aligned, probably won't be aligned to whatever larger goal you have for the system, because it was specialized to some other very specific environment. On the concept of suffering, I think also it's really important when, and this is something that an idea I've sort of picked up from Mike, if you are going to think about engineering agents by taking inspiration from biology, it's very important to engineer agents that are capable of tolerating stress, that are resilient, that are able to, or rather that you don't run the danger of creating something capable of immense suffering if you take it out of one or two very specific environments. So creating resilient agents that are flexible is somehow a sort of moral imperative on top of a very practical one.
Thank you, Dalton. Stephen, because you've worked on plasticity as well, do you now have a perspective on how it plays a role in alignment and what constitutes your definition of alignment?
Well, I noticed that you use words like information, model, the system knows, and I believe that these are concepts that may be appropriate to stationary systems, but not non-stationary, morphogenetic or evolutionary systems, at least in my experience, if only because there's a critical issue of emergence. First, information theory is not even properly defined in a fully non-stationary system where the rules of the game are evolving. You don't have priors. You don't have stable conditional probabilities. To talk about a model isn't helpful if the model is self-organizing into a different model, like a blastula into a gastrula, for example. And there is no knowledge in the system. It's just the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And I've spent my entire life modeling how to get a system as a whole to be coherent or resonant within itself and with other systems without ever using these concepts. In particular, I'll be talking about adaptive resonance theory, which is one of the foundational models I was driven to. And I derived adaptive resonance theory after having used it to explain a lot of psychological, neurobiological data about how we pay attention, learn, recognize, predict the non-stationary world. I derived it from a thought experiment. And the thought experiment asks how any system can autonomously develop and learn to correct predictive errors in a changing world. And Darwinian selection is all about how you adapt to a changing world. And the hypotheses that go into the derivation of art are just simple environmental constraints that we all know from daily life. And the thought experiment shows when these constraints are combined through evolution, art-like systems are the result. And the constraints never use the word mind or brain. And so one would expect resonant type systems throughout phylogeny. And indeed, in my own work, I've proposed resonant systems throughout phylogeny. But in order to talk about that, you need a concept of resonance. You have to close all the feedback loops. Among other things, the system has to dynamically stabilize itself. But if it has these properties, then synchronization, which I guess is related to, the word you were using, alignment, is an emergent property.